Join us now on Flickr at flickr.com/groups/art-of-photography. Welcome to the Art of Photography. I'm Ted Forbes. Today we're going to talk about filters, and I get a lot of questions in the Flickr forums, and also I've got some emails from users that are asking me about filters and what kind of filter do I need for my camera, what effect does it have on my photographs, things like that. And I brought a bunch of examples with me, and today I'm going to try and demystify that a little bit. And the first kind of filters I want to talk about are kind of these big solid color filters. I have a red filter and an orange filter. There's also a green and a yellow. These are typically used in black and white film photography. Now, let me make a note to digital film users here, to digital camera users here. There are ways to set your camera to just go ahead and take monochrome images. So when you download them to your computer, they're already black and white. And I have had very mixed results trying to use these with that method. They just simply don't work. There are better ways to convert a color image to a monochrome where you have a lot more control over the image. So using Photoshop or Aperture, Lightroom, something like that is certainly a better option. So let's talk about these in the sense of film black and white photography. But these kind of stem back from the early days of photography where film was designed differently. And early film was not as red sensitive as film is now. So a lot of times you had to use filters to correct kind of the contrast, the way things would work. Also, in the last podcast we talked about lens elements. And today a lot of manufacturers actually have patented coatings that they will put on these elements as they're building the lens. And what the coating does is several things. It kind of ensures that the contrast is a little more balanced in the lens, it prevents light flares, things like that. So anyway, but these are still useful today, even with modern equipment. Anyway, a lot of times you used to use, like the yellow is the mildest, orange is in the middle, and red is the most severe as far as controlling or increasing contrast in your image. So they will certainly do that. The other thing they do, other than increasing contrast on your film, is they actually, a colored filter will, in a black and white setting, it will take whatever color the filter is, and in this case it's red, let's say. So anything red in your shot, it's going to lighten, so your reds will come out more on the white end of things. And then the opposite color on the color wheel, the complementary color, which is blue in this case, will actually darken. So using a red filter with a film camera is a great way if you're doing outdoor landscape types of things and you really dark sky. Well, that sky is blue and a red filter is going to make that go dark. It's also going to make objects that are red in the scene pop out and be white. So sometimes if you have flowers or something like that, that's a really common technique to use with a red filter. I typically, about 95% of the time, shoot black and white with an orange filter just to give me a little bit more contrast than usual. And then there's some other things that I do to manipulate the film development beyond that. But anyway, these are a great way to get into that, and you know, they're very applicable to black and white photography. The next couple filters I want to show you, I've got a couple. This is kind of interesting. This is a split level filter, or split filter, and you can see here, this has kind of a ring on the outside, and you can turn this collar and once it's mounted on your camera and actually control this. But as you can see here, it is like half, you know, see-through here, or half UV filter, and then the top half is kind of a dark gradient. And what this does for you is, I've got an example here that I've shot. You can see in this example, the water tower, it actually darkens the sky when you pull this filter over it, but not the entire sky the same color. And it's close enough to the lens to where you don't see a hard line where that gradient ends, and you get just a really nice fluid darkening sky as it comes down towards the horizon line. So that's kind of an interesting filter to use. These look really good on sunsets too. If you're shooting, you know, the sun coming up or going down, you can kind of increase the dramatic effect of the light or the color in the photo. So that's what the split level filter does. It's really pretty cool. And then there are two other filters here I want to show you real quick. This one is a neutral density filter. Okay, now what does a neutral density filter do? Well, all it does is it takes the light that your camera is seeing in the scene and it decreases everything by, and there are different levels of neutral density filters you can get. This is an ND2, and so this decreases everything one stop. Okay, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. But anyway, why would you want to do that? Well, there may be a situation where you want to get a more shallow depth of field and you're shooting outdoors. And typically outdoors, if you're in a lot of light, you need to stop the camera down quite a bit. And so your depth of field is pretty broad. And so what this does is it allows you to open your aperture a little bit and get a different effect there. But you know, the name implies neutral density filter. It does not change the color at all. It doesn't do anything for the scene except just lower the overall volume of light, if you will. So anyway, so that's kind of what that does. And these come ND2, there's also an ND4 and an ND6, and each one of them will lower the light one stop. So the ND2 lowers it to one stop of light, so you need to add an additional stop. This is called the filter factor. The ND4 is 2 stops and the ND6 is 3 stops. So basically you take the ND number and you divide it by 2, and that's how many stops you need to give it. And then over here I have a circular polarizer. And this is an interesting filter too. What this does is that this controls reflective light surfaces. And so sometimes people will go ahead and use a circular polarizer if they're shooting a landscape or they feel like there's any kind of atmospheric light or reflecting light off of rocks or mountains or whatever's in their scene that could kind of blow out in the shot and be kind of distracting. What's really nice about a circular polarizer also is if you're shooting your subject is against glass. Okay, so I have an example here. I'll show you. This is just the window of the studio here, and you can see there's a reflection of the blind behind it, the blinds. And as I put this filter over the top and turn it, and it's actually another 2-set filter here where you can turn the outer ring once it's screwed onto your lens. You can see that I can actually get rid of that reflection and dial it out. And so that's very handy to have, especially if you're shooting anything in a big glass surface or near a glass surface and the reflections become distracting at that point. Now, again, there is a filter factor here. Now, filters are supposed to be labeled, and I noticed that only one of mine actually is in this collection here. The red filter will decrease the light. The circular polarizer will decrease the light, even the orange filter will. And so you got to know what that filter factor is. Now, if you're mounting these on a digital SLR camera and you're just metering, you don't need to worry about anything because the metering is happening through the lens. Same with old 35mm cameras. So all you have to do is put this on your camera and shoot normally. The meter will go ahead and make that adjustment on its own. However, if you're shooting on a camera that doesn't have a meter or you're using a handheld meter, something like this, you do need to know what the filter factor is because your exposure will be overexposed. Or actually your shot will come out underexposed, you know, in relationship to the exposure you have. And so if you don't know how to do that and you don't know what the number is, basically all you do is this: take your light meter and put the filter over it. Or a great thing to do is grab your DSLR, you know, when you're having some downtime, and write down your filter factors. Expose a scene, write down the setting, put this on, figure out what the difference is between the two settings. The red filter is, I believe, a full stop. The orange filter is like 1/3 of a stop, so they can vary, but you do want your exposure to be correct because you want to get a good shot in the end. So anyway, that's what those do. There are some other filters that like for instance, we'll filter out tungsten light or fluorescent light, and you know, this is all cured with white balancing anyway, and you can kind of take care of this with software. If you're shooting color slide film, you probably do want to get into tungsten filters or fluorescent light filters, but if you're shooting on a digital camera, you're going to get way more power out of your white balance settings than you will from a filter anyway. Plus, the other thing is if you're shooting slide film, you can buy film that is rated for tungsten lighting. Now, let me explain real quick what I'm talking about here. Tungsten lighting typically are household lamps. Just light bulbs you get at the grocery store, and they have an orange kind of hue to them, and your eye doesn't really see this when you're sitting around at home because your eyes will adjust to whatever environment they're in. So if you're in kind of this orangey light, it's going to start seeing the whites as white. It's just kind of what your brain will do. However, the camera does not see it that way. The camera turns everything, you know, have a heavy orange cast on it, and then also under fluorescent lights you get this funky green cast to colors. And so there are filters that you can get, fluorescent light filters or tungsten filters that will filter those out. The tungsten filters are blue. They lighten up the orange on, or darken the orange and lighten up the blues. So anyway, and fluorescent does the opposite with the green. But like I said, I think white balancing on a digital camera for color is a much better way to go than something like that. So anyway, for black and white film, you really need to have the orange, yellow, and red filters if you're serious about controlling contrast. And I would say on a digital camera, neutral density filters and circular polarizers are certainly good investments to make. They're not real expensive, except maybe the circular polarizer. It's kind of complicated because it's going going to start like throwing light away from the lens, so it filters it out. So typically there's a little more engineering involved and they cost a little more. But anyway, so I hope that demystifies filters just a little bit. There are way more filters than that even. Back in the 80s when people shot film, there was a filter for everything, I think. But anyway, these are the big ones that are commonly used, that are very applicable for what anybody's doing and probably should be in your camera bag. So anyway, this has been The Art of Photography, and thanks for watching.